Welcome everyone to the show, Combustible Elements, real talk for real people. Here we try to put different ideas and perspectives together in a pot, heat it up, and get an explosion of knowledge and understanding. We understand that problems can only be fixed starting from the bottom to the top, building a great foundation for change and improvement. I'm Big Mel, and I'm joined by Ruben, aka the Monarch, and Aaron, the Hitman. Let's get started.
So thank you once again for joining us for Combustible Elements. I'm Big Mel. I'm joined by Aaron the Hitman and the ever-present Ruben the Monarch. So we got a different topic for you this week. Before I say that, like and subscribe. Keep on watching. Leave a comment. Come on, we out here for you. So be out here for us. That's all I'm gonna say about that. We're putting out good content, just to make it clear. We ain't putting out shit. So we're putting out good content. So we want you to be a part of this. So the topic this week is the cost of freedom, because everything that's going on in the world, people don't understand the cost of freedom or what you do for freedom. So that is our topic this week. So we're going to let the monarch tell us what he thinks freedom is.
So I know a lot of people are aware of what's going on right now with the Ukraine and Russia. And essentially, with a lot of the sanctions that they're imposing on Russia, that their fight isn't being fought, as far as like the countries that are outside of Russia and Ukraine. The war that's being waged on on Russia by the rest of the nations in the world is economical. So essentially, when you think about the cost of freedom, anytime you hear war, people always assume that you're gonna mount people up and give them guns and send them off to go fight and kill folks. When that might have been true, 200-300 years ago, or even 50 years ago, but in the current civilization that we have today, it's mostly done in an economical fashion, meaning they're gonna just stop people from trading with you, stop you from trading with other people, stop giving you access to money and access to supplies and access to different financial things, which is gonna essentially cripple you. You got a lot of the people that the Russian oligarchs, or even if they weren't oligarchs, you got a lot of the Russian people, the majority of them who are commoners. These people, some of them, they might have had $100,000 on their account, prior to the day that Russia officially invaded Ukraine, and that same 100,000 turned out to be $1,000, or even $100. If they even had that much, because the true cost of all of those wars is people's financial well-beings, their ability to just live and survive and just being able to take care of everyday needs.
Aaron, what does the cost of freedom, just off the top of your head, what does that mean to you as soon as you hear that?
I mean, like I can't get as deep as Ruben did, but I mean, I take a different approach to it. Like at the end of the day, there is no real such thing as freedom, because there are limitations to everything. So nothing we don't have freedom because we still have rules and regulations that guide our country and guide the world in the way that we're supposed to be going in. So I mean, there is no freedom. So, but I understand what aspect and what Ruben was talking about as far as like the war and the things of that aspect. But if we just talking about the cost of freedom, we have more freedom in our country than other countries have, but a complete freedom is not something that anybody actually has.
Okay, so before I go into asking you more questions, I'm going to answer this one. The cost of freedom off the top of my head. For me, sometimes I can be a deep thinker. So the first question is, what is freedom? I mean, Aaron elaborated too. We're the most freest country in the world. So that we know of. I mean, but it might be other regions that's freer than we are. We just don't know. But what is freedom? Like freedom for what? You're always going to have some kind of structure in society. You know, generally you want it to be the numbers game. The more people that's for something, the majority. Sometimes that's not the right way to go because sometimes the minority rules the majority too. So first we need to determine what freedom is to really answer this question, but we're not going to do that this week. But that's my first thought. Like, what is freedom? And freedom to do what? Like people say, I don't have no freedom. Or people in this country, as Aaron said, we're a staple for the rest of the world. And people in this country, they complain about what they can and can't do, which is like ridiculous when you talk to somebody in another country where they really can't do nothing. Like, we can speak out against any war, rallies, whatever, protests. But in Russia, you locked up automatically. I think they said one lady was locked up, one news reporter, and they detained her to a hearing. And I heard something that I didn't know, which is in Russia, if you're a mother, you have a child under 14, and it's not a major offense, they can't take you to jail because they need you to raise your child. I thought that was interesting when I heard that. I don't know why I threw that out, but I thought that was real interesting when I heard that. But what we dictate as being freedom, other people may say that's just the excesses of our government, of our people here. We have too many rights. So the cost of freedom is whatever that group or that minority of people think is freedom first. What is freedom to them? And then now, once you determine what the majority of people decide is their freedom, it becomes, are you willing to do what's necessary to achieve that goal? So that's what that means to me. Now, I'm gonna go back to what Ruben said. Ruben was dead on with a couple of his points. Everybody talk about war, but everybody forget about the Cold War. The Cold War between the United States and the USSR. That's a war where they only came into conflict one time, which was like the Cuban, or close to conflict one time, which was the Cuban Missile Crisis, when they wanted to put weapons on our doorstep. Sound familiar? For those Russians that said, we don't want Ukraine to be a part of NATO, so you don't put no missiles pointing at us on our doorstep. That could be a problem. So a lot of people will go to war over that. But the USSR ended because of finances. Countries wanted to break apart because of the finances. And the United States controlled the finances. So when Ruben said that war is waged with money, he was spot on. These sanctions that are on Russia right now, not only are they going to hurt Russia, but a lot of Russia allies are going to gain from it. So my next question to the cost of freedom, we pretty much annexed Venezuela, right? Because we didn't like their system of government. We felt like they were like subverting the cost of freedom or freedom in their country. But since we put these sanctions on Russia, we talking to Venezuela about getting their oil. Now we annexed them from the world's market. Now we're about to put them right back in the world's market because of what's going on with Russia. So how do you guys feel about the US changing stances because they want to get Russia so bad? Either one of you. We weren't prepared for this question. We're never really prepared for these questions, but I know they weren't prepared for this one.
Honestly, I think when it comes to how the foreign policy works here in the United States, it's just all a matter of, what's beneficial for the U.S. in the meantime. And like, as long as it's beneficial to the U.S.
Take it from here. I think it's stopped. Go ahead, continue, Ruben.
So we had some technical difficulties, but we're back. So like I was saying, one of the things that I've been more aware of with all of this that's been going on is, a lot of these so-called third world countries, they're really not even third world countries. It's just a matter of like, the big power countries making the conscious decision to push these people out of the economical commerce that that involves trading with other different countries throughout the world. That's going to give them the necessities that they need for their countries to thrive. If you can sit there and watch a country like Russia that is a powerhouse, that has assets, that has oil, that has things that the world needs, and everyone just saying, you know what, we're not going to play with you because you're not playing fair, and all of a sudden we watch their economy basically collapse. How do we explain what happened with Haiti? How do you explain what happened with Jamaica? How do we explain what happened to all Iraq? How do you explain what happened with all these different countries that once the people from those countries decide, yo, we don't want to deal with what y'all telling us to do. We don't want to play ball how y'all want us to play ball. They decide, okay, you know what? Y'all want to be free? y'all want to do what y'all want? Say less. Now y'all can't play over here on this court. All right, y'all can't play with our ball. Y'all can't play on our court. If y'all not gonna play by our rules, y'all can't play at all. And then you start having countries deteriorate. You start having countries not being able to provide for themselves, not being able to do anything for themselves, even if they have resources in those countries. If you can't trade, if you can't make commerce, then you're not gonna be free to do whatever it is that you want to do.
Okay, so I'm gonna let Aaron answer his questions, but I'm gonna just make this statement, which is, yes, you're right. If you don't do what a country says do, and it's a powerhouse, and they want you to do it, they got many tools to make you do it, other than just soldiers, economically take you out of the world market. But it may not be fair. But if you have somebody that wants to play with your ball and you don't like them, you're not going to let them play with your ball. So it's just a staple of life. Some of those countries that you named, it's been unfair from the start. Some of those countries that you named, or one of them, Iraq, kind of brought on what happened to them when they invaded Kuwait, because they tried to corner the whole Middle Eastern market of oil, and they wasn't going to do that because then Saudi Arabia was going to be next. But you're spot on with how is it fair for them just to do that? It was never fair, but business ain't been fair neither. When people start seeing who I can work with, where I can get this. Aaron, what do you think about the U.S. now trying to have a partnership with Venezuela after they just annexed them for like the last decade, because they want to get some of their oil in here to make up for the percentage of oil that they're missing from Russia?
Well, I mean, again, like, I'm not all into politics, but at the same time, it depends on who's in power of the country. So at the time where they broke apart from them, one person obviously was in power of the country and the decisions that they was making. And of course, they had the balance of power and things like that. But at the same time, this president or the people in power right now might feel like that's the best way to go. And whenever we get a new president, they may feel like that's not the best way to go. So they might break apart again. Because everybody's not necessarily unified, even though we are the United States. We're not always unified in the decisions that we make. But there is a president who ultimately makes, decisions like that. And right now we need oil. And if that's the best person to try to get oil from, then yeah, you go over there. Ruben took his ball. His ball was the best inflated ball. He had the NBA ball. We got the street ball that's halfway flat. We need ball now. We're going over to Mel. Mel, I know we kicked you out, but you got the best basketball right now. Like, come play with us. So and then of course, it's going to be a benefit. It's going to be mutually beneficial. They're not just going to go over there like, yo, we need your oil. You back in. Of course, they're going to appeal to them and, have to offer them something in return. In order for them to give us what we need, we're going to have to be giving them something that they need as well.
Well, I think they picked Venezuela because if they say we'll buy your oil, they just going to be like, okay. just like that, because they've been out of the market so long. And I think Russia was one of their biggest clients. When they cut ties with Venezuela, I think Chavez was in charge over there. Since he died, I'm not sure who's in charge. I know it's been disputed, the election, for several years. So, you know, that's my little political statement right now. So pay me no mind. I'm just rambling. So can you give me a situation where your freedom would cost too much to you? Like either one of you, what would be a price tag that you guys ain't willing to pay?
I mean, honestly, the true price of freedom is death, man. That's essentially, you know, the Haitian model. That's part of how, you know, they were able to gain their freedom, because, you know, there was no fear of death, and they understood that. Once they understood that, and they believed that, and lived and died by that, you know, they were able to attain their freedom. If we talk about actual freedom, because what we got right now in a lot of these countries is liberties, not true freedom. No one's really free, because, you know, you got change, whether you realize it or not. You know, whether it's in the form of a 9 to 5, or whether it's in the form of, you know, a habit or some sort. Everyone has some type of chain that they're shackled by. You know, it could be physical chains, or it could be mental chains, it could be spiritual chains, but it's just society as we know it. They've implemented, you know, different forms and different level of slaveries, and the only time you start to realize it is when you're having conversations, or you watching different documentaries about people that you might have thought were, you know, super free because they got all this amount of money and they got all this tremendous amount of wealth, and you're like, yo, like, this person going through the same thing I'm going through, and they sitting in $1 million house, they sitting in a, you know, $10 million house, and you hear them you know, crying, say, listen, man, I was doing this, I was on TV, I had this and I had that, but I couldn't do anything, and, you know, and I wanted to say something, but I couldn't speak. But you're free. You know, so I think, you know, that's, for me, the true price and the true cost of freedom. You know, if I'm gonna go with how my ancestors did it, it'll be death. Like, if you're not willing to die for your freedom, then you're never gonna really be free.
Okay, Aaron.
Yeah, so I'm gonna agree with Ruben. We got different ancestors, but I agree, you know, because by the straight definition of freedom, nobody has freedom. And by the definition of liberty, we have more liberties than others. We don't have full liberty. So like nobody really has freedom. It just looks that way to other people because we're able to do certain things. Like I think it was last show, like we could outwardly talk trash about our government and our president, and it's cool because we have freedom of speech until we start saying things that we can't threaten to kill anybody. Like then we don't have true freedom. But we can say things about the government and the president and still be alive the next day. People can't do that in other places. So we don't have freedom. We have freedom to an extent, and we have certain liberties, but we do not have full liberty as well. So yeah, to sum it all up, like the only way you have true freedom is through death. And that's when you're completely free, depending on how you live your life. But that's a whole nother topic. That's a whole nother topic to get into.
Okay, so I'm gonna throw this out there. I agree with you. The cost of freedom is always going to be a pile of bodies in some way. But the cost of freedom now might be a pile up in bodies for one generation, as opposed to history has taught us that freedom was a little bit more brutal. So we'll look at what's going on in Ukraine, the fight that they putting up, and we wonder, you know, would they do that over here? Would people be able to fight over here in the rest of the world that we saw? Historically, if you lost a war and we're going back in like the 1500s before to BC, you know, if you lost a war, you were dead. Your wife was taken, she was a slave. Your kids was going to be slaves. Their kids was going to be slaves, and so on and so on. So when people went out to fight, they would literally fight until they died. That was the cost to them, because the cost was like, we talk about generational wealth. We were talking about generational servitude. And I mean real servitude, not like, oh, we're going to be able to push them out in like 5 or 10 years. Yeah, it could be a brutal 5 or 10 years for you to push them out. But back then, we might have been talking centuries, easy. Or maybe you just got enveloped over time and then you started being a part of them because they was the winning team. So the cost is death. But I still, even in this time and day and age, I don't think death is the only cost. It's just the cost we have to deal with now because we're more civilized to an extent. Now, I'm gonna ask a question, and then I'm gonna ask another question, our final thought, because this is something I wrestled with whether I should ask it or not, but I'm gonna ask it because it really sums up the cost of freedom. So I'm gonna ask you both, what do you consider to be freedom? Because we're talking about freedom, but we're saying you never have true freedom. Every government controls you. In your opinion, real quick, what would be freedom for you?
I mean, because I feel like you have to go by the definition of what freedom is. And like, I know a lot of people throw around words and we feel like we know what the concept of words are, but we don't know what the actual definition is. But like, freedom is to not have any restraint or consequences to the things that you do and say. So in that regards, like we don't have true freedom. So that's what true freedom is, to not have any restraints, or you don't have any consequences to the things that you do and say. That is what complete freedom is. So
okay, so your shirt says make war. So we're about to make some war because you're telling me what the definition is. I asked you what freedom means to you, period.
And I said, I'm going to go by what the definition is, because that's what
your answer, the definition.
Yes, that's what true freedom is. Because like I said, we understand words and concept of words, but we don't understand the definition of what the word actually means. And I would rather go by what the real meaning of the word is. So yes, that is my answer. I'm going by what the truth, because in that regards, like, we're only lying to ourselves, and I try not to lie to myself as much as possible. So looking up the real meaning of the word freedom, that is what I feel like freedom is. So
you can't lie to yourself that way.
Huh?
You can't lie to yourself that way, looking up the real definition.
No, you can't, because like I said, we know words. You can say all the words and you understand how to use them in a sentence, but some words we just really don't know the meaning to the words. So we use the words in the right context, but not knowing the true meaning of what the word is.
Okay, Ruben, what is freedom to you?
I mean, freedom to me is the ability to do what I want, when I want, how I want. To me, so it's like it's not just I mean, it's something similar to what Aaron said, but you know, there's consequence to everything you do. For any action, there's a reaction. So it's not so much being able to do things without consequences, but just being able to move and do things when I want to do it on my time, at my leisure. You know, so like, whether that be, you know, going to work, not going to work, you know, waking up at 6 or waking up at 12, you know, going on vacation on a whim, you know, taking, you know, my family somewhere just because I wanted to and felt like it, just having the freedom to do that. You know, that to me, that's freedom. I mean, I can go with Aaron's definition of it. You know, if that, not, I'm not gonna say Aaron's there, but you know, the actual written definition of it. But for me, if I'm able to move and live on my terms and do what I feel like when I feel like doing it, then I'm gonna feel like I'm free.
Okay. So for me, forget the definition for what it means to me. As long as I'm not hurting people, the ability to grow, the freedom of not being restricted in my life, to become more than who I am. So sometimes society can hold a person back. You know, you can make your decisions according to society. Now, as long as I'm not a detriment to society, I'm not hurting anybody. Freedom to me is the ability to grow and become more than what I am. So I answered that question
How
without
would
a
you
definition.
somebody?
Excuse me?
Who determines if you're hurting somebody, you or the other
The
person?
person that you hurt.
Right.
You
So
know if you're hurting somebody.
well, within your job, if you do or say something that somebody doesn't like, that's technically you hurting them, right?
They call and they complain about it. That's that whether I intentionally hurt somebody or someone perceived it that way, those are totally two different things. If somebody perceived you did something, you can't do anything about that. People are allowed to come to their own conclusion about everything. But me as a person, if I'm not hurting anybody, you should know whether you hurt somebody on purpose or not.
Well, you ain't say on purpose. You said if you wasn't hurting anybody. So like your perception of you hurting somebody and somebody being hurt because of what you did is two different things. Just like your perception of freedom and what freedom really is two different things. But we could go on to the next question.
We could go back and forth, but we not. But my perception is my perception.
Right.
Just like your definition from the book is your definition from the book. That's how I envision it. And we're talking about the freedom to express myself in the way that I envision everything. And that's how I'm envisioning. Now, we're going to get to our topic. And we usually call it, who's to blame? So we're not really going to call it who's to blame today, because we already know who's to blame. So the topic is your feelings. And I tried to think of somebody that we know the cost of freedom was raised, the bar was raised real high, so they couldn't get it. So let's talk about the continent of Africa, the cost of freedom for the continent of Africa. Anybody want to go, or you want me to go first so you can have time to think about it?
Yeah, I'm gonna let you.
You can go first.
Okay. The reason I had a hard time wrestling with this topic is when you really think about the history in this continent, slaves, we know Africa is plentiful in its resources, probably the most plentiful continent we have left because they haven't been destroyed by the Industrial Revolution. Gold, diamonds, oil, coal, if you're a poacher, ivory. A lot of your medicines are made from herbs that are found in those rainforests or in those areas over there. So it's a gold mine to the rest of the world. How can a country that has been decimated over centuries be responsible to owe this much debt to the rest of the world? That is totally insane. You had actual human trafficking as machinery. If anything, the rest of the world that engaged in slavery should owe Africa money, not the other way around. They make it so hard that the cost of their freedom, they can never pay. I'm disgusted by that. I don't like it. And it's a perfect example of the cost of freedom. Somebody setting the bar so you can't really obtain true freedom. Anybody else want to join in now? I'm done. I'm just voicing a true fact. It's a true statement. It's a true fact.
I mean, to piggyback off what you're saying about Africa, the same thing could be said with Haiti. When Haiti gained its freedom in 1804, one of the things that France made sure it did, and they teamed up with the U.S. and they teamed up with the England, and they made sure that if Haiti was going to be recognized as a powerhouse that it was at the time, that they had to pay reparations to France, and it was forced to do so, and it did for close to 200 years. Like they paid them, I forget how many billions that ended up being. So you got a new country who's trying to get itself together, who's recently gained its freedom. And a lot of people don't know Haiti had one of the best, if not the, actually Haiti had the best Navy in the world at the time when it gained its freedom. You know, they trained, they were training some of the U.S. Navy ships and Navy folks early on. It had the toughest and most fierce warriors and soldiers. You know, early on, in order, right after slavery, one of the things that was a requirement in the country was for everybody to have passed through, every men and women that once they got to a certain age, they had to go serve in the army for about 4 years. So our army was fierce, our Navy was fierce, but you know, because of the economical strain of having to pay back, you know, such a large sum for such a long period of time, it essentially left them crippled. And even till today, they can't get out. They haven't been able to get from underneath that debt. You know, even though they've paid it off, but that freedom that Haiti gained, you know, for its people, and the freedom that it was able to provide for a lot of the South American countries, you know, it paid for that dearly, and it's still paying for it till today.
And I agree with you on that. And before I let Aaron answer, I want to remind you and remind anybody that's listening, we're talking about in the 1700s and the 1800s, and you're hearing terms of billions. Did they really even have a concept of $1 billion? Like, this is what you owe back then. You know what I mean? That was more what net worth than most of these countries that we're talking about. You know, not Haiti and Africa, but obviously the United States and France and England. You're talking about they didn't even have an operating budget of $5 billion. We're talking about $1 billion debt that they put on nations. Aaron, how do you feel about this?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I'm cutting into your time.
No, I forgot the question. What was the question again?
Okay, how do you feel about Africa? Ruben's brought up Haiti, where the cost of freedom for them is we're going to put so much debt on you that you're never truly going to be free.
Oh, all right. Yeah. So at the end of the day, because like I said, like nobody's free. So the cost that they put on other countries for it to be so high, for the false illusion of them being free, is just to make sure that they stay in power, stay higher than other countries. So is like Ruben was saying, like they put them in debt, billions and billions of dollars, and then they still don't have freedom. And even if they pay back the money, they still don't have freedom, like, because nobody genuinely actually has freedom. Because at the end of the day, if they paid all the money back to who they had to pay the money back to, they're still over top of them. If you owe me $100, you paid me the $100 back, but I'm still over top of you because I still have more money than you. I still have more power than you. But at the same time, because you can't pay that back, you're still indebted to us. So we can still use your resources at will whenever we want and need to, because you're indebted to us. And that is, I think that was perfectly, unfortunately, constructed that way in order for these countries and people to be indebted to people who know can never have the sustainability without those other countries.
Interesting. I agree with you. I think they call it global interest. I could be wrong, but you can never come out of debt as long as the interest keep growing. I mean, they even use that tactic over here. We say the government uses these tactics. Our governments use these tactics. They used it with mortgage loans, and they kind of like crashed a couple of years ago when the economy crashed with the mortgages that were scaled back on the interest rate, and they kept going up and down, up and down. Ruben would know more about it than me, but we're not going to get into that. That's a whole other kind of conversation. So I want to thank everybody for joining us for Combustible Elements. We're out on social media everywhere, every platform. Please like and subscribe, leave a comment. If you got something you want to talk about, let's talk about it. We're in the business of talking about problems and coming up with solutions. You know, we don't just want to talk about the stuff, we want to live it and fix it. And that was the whole concept of what this was that brought the show into fruition. So we need you to keep on telling us what we may be missing, because life catches up to us all. And we don't want your problems to be other people's problems when we can handle it ahead of time. So thank you for joining us for Combustible Elements. I'm Big Mel. I'm joined by Ruben the Monarch. I might start calling you Ruben the Haitian Monarch. I'm joined by the Hitman, Aaron. Almost forgot your name. I'm joined by the Hitman, Aaron. I don't know why he want to make war. And I want to peace out from you guys and talk to you in the future. And please, like I said, leave a comment. Let us know what's on your mind. Thank you, Jake. Thank you for joining us for Combustible Elements. I'm all tongue-tied right now. I look forward to talking to you in the future. Peace out.